Everything in this universe has a beginning. The Big Bang. The formation of nebular matter into stars and planets. The first collections of amino acids in the Earth's oceans. The first creatures to leave them. The first mammals. The first primates that walked upright. The first religion. The first printing press.
Pump up your space boots and phone home. It's time for Let's Find Out with co-host Diego.
Live. To tape from the mothership. It's Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Bigfoot, UFOs, Stargates, Let's Find Out. Paranormal, intelligent design, entertainment, Let's Find Out. You're listening to Let's Find Out with co-host Diego.
Welcome to another episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Thank you so very much for being here tonight. On this episode of Let's Find Out, we have the person behind Howling Underdog Films. They are producers of the documentaries on topics such as cryptozoology, history, and the adventures of exploring our world. Their first film, Judaculla, Legend of the Devil's Courthouse, was released in May of 2022, and a sequel series is now being filmed. We will be taking a look at that plus more. Please welcome Chuck. Chuck, welcome to Let's Find Out. Thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to meet you.
Hey, it's nice meeting you, and it's one of those things when I just recently joined Instagram, and I started looking out for perfect folks to bring on the show for the listeners, and then I saw Howling Underdog Films, and just the title itself made me curious. I click on that, and I was amazed by what I saw. But before we dive into the documentary, can you give us a quick background on your work and how you came to start producing this documentary?
Sure. Really, everything started when I was a teenager. I was probably like a freshman in high school, either that or like last year of junior high, somewhere around there. And I remember it was early one morning, and I was getting ready to go to school, and I'm standing on the front porch, and I can hear this sound coming from the mountain. And it was really loud, kind of wailing, almost kind of like a siren, but it wasn't. And I stood there and listened to it for several minutes, and whatever it was just had tremendous lung capacity because it was able to hold this for quite a while. An impressive volume. And just as I stood there and listened to it, you could hear it going down the mountain because as it got further away, it would grow more and more faint. And I never saw anything, but it sparked my curiosity. I wasn't able to record it. This was long, long ago, but I'd always had it kind of in the back of my mind. And then a few years later, there was a show that used to come on the Outdoor Life Network. It was called Mysterious Encounters. And that was really one of the first shows that I'd ever watched where it showed people taking Bigfoot seriously and actually going to different places and looking into reports. And it was very interesting to me because some of the things that they were showing on that show, the recordings, some of them were similar to what I had heard. So again, that just kind of added to the curiosity. And the years passed, a lot older now, I'm almost 40. In late 2017, early 2017, sorry, my dad was diagnosed with cancer and had passed away. And after that, I needed something to kind of occupy my mind as I kind of dealt with that. So I needed a project, something to focus on. So I went back to those old Bigfoot stories and just started looking through those and just seeing, what was in a reasonable distance that I could drive to and just kind of check out, look around, things like that. And the more I kind of dug into it, the more I soon discovered that there was a local Cherokee story about this large, hairy, ugly being called They called him Judaculla, and he was here before the people, and he was here to when the people first arrived. They didn't really understand, how to live off the land and things like that. And Judaculla was there to kind of show them, what they needed to do. And he was viewed as more of a protector of the land. And there is this big piece of soapstone. It's in Jackson County, North Carolina. And there are these really strange carvings that nobody has ever really deciphered what they are 100%. There's plenty of theories that go all the way to a map of local game and resources, all the way to aliens. So it was just this really interesting story that tied into what I had already been looking into, and I thought, well, that would be kind of a fun project. So that's the one I kind of delved into. And I just kind of collected all these stories from the past and just kind of built things up to modern day. And there was one camping trip that we actually went on during that one. And while we were there, there were three of us. We were walking down a trail, and somebody had pointed out that they saw like a little tree limb that had been broken. And it was about 7.5 feet off the ground, something like that. And it wasn't much, but it was just kind of one of those, okay. So we just kept on going a little further down the trail, and it was maybe 50 yards away. It wasn't very far at all. We come across this bigger tree that had been broken down, and we started looking at it, and it wasn't a clean break. You could see where it had a twist to it. And again, it was around that 7-foot mark. So we looked around the area, we camped, we set out digital recorders, trail cameras, and just tried to see what we could find. And in the end, that was the only thing we got. And I'm not saying that it was Bigfoot. I'm just saying that it was something interesting, because you hear the stories about them twisting trees and things like that. And right. We're in an area that supposedly has sightings, and here's tree twist. So it just kept me, digging further and further down that rabbit hole.
Right, and that's easy. And I'm sorry, look, I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry. That's easy to do, because that would be technically the second experience you have with this, right?
Right.
And with that, so before you started even becoming the filming, did you contact any other investigators out there to see if they can help you out with this, or maybe sometimes to not be afraid of what it is you've encountered or listened to?
I did, actually. It was several years after I heard that sound, and I had found the BFRO, because at the time that was the only place that I could find online that was actually taking reports. So I filled out a report and submitted it to them, and I actually had somebody respond back to me, and we spoke on the phone a couple of days later for quite a while, and I've actually stayed in touch with him. His name is Jim Charneski, and he actually is in Judaculla. I actually set up an interview with him, and we sat down and talked about some of his experiences. I showed him some of the things that we'd come across to get his opinions on, and it was just a really wonderful experience. He's actually coming back for the Habitats documentary.
All right, and for the folks that haven't had a chance yet to either see the previews or actually see the documentary, you can go on YouTube and check it out. I was quite amazed, and I'm a little embarrassed to say that I was not well educated in Judaculla, and then I started looking into things, and what amazed me is that the landmark, the rock with the petroglyphs and these drawings, that there are some archaeologists that have agreed or have a theory that this predates even the Cherokee habitation of Western North Carolina.
Yeah, and we went up there and we're checking out the rock, and it is just this huge stone, and it's so cool to see all this on there. And on the lower right hand side of it, you can actually see where they carved out little sections to make like pottery and things like that. It's really cool. If you've never been there, it's definitely a cool spot to go to.
Yeah, it looks terrific because I love going to places like this, and that's probably going to be my next thing on my bucket list. And I will be definitely dragging the wife to go see that. But while you were there, and then when you started filming and having the interviews, did you uncover more information than you originally anticipated? Is there much more to this than we think?
Well, as far as the story of Judaculla, okay, the story goes that he made his home on a mountain nearby called the Devil's Courthouse that is on the Blue Ridge Parkway. And we also go there, and it's a beating on the legs to get to the top because it's pretty steep, but it's a nice, wonderful hike. Once you get to the top, it's this beautiful view. You can see 4 states: North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, and it is just this absolutely breathtaking view. But the story said that he made his home somewhere in the caves that are supposed to be underneath the mountain, and that one day there were a group of hunters that were coming through. They were trespassing on his land. So he was at his home on the Devil's Courthouse and saw them trespassing, and the story goes that he leapt from the mountain and landed on the stone and left an imprint of his 7-fingered hand on there. And when you're there, you can make out this weird looking kind of hand-shaped kind of carving into it, so it's intriguing. But we started going through the folklore a little bit, further along in time, and then we get to the early settlers and some of their stories and things like that, and we just kind of work our way up into modern day. And one of the stories that Jim told in Judaculla, he actually had a really interesting sighting. And he actually tells that story. And here's something that I thought was kind of really interesting to me anyway. I've been using the Bigfoot mapping project, and that's where I've been getting a lot of the locations that I've been visiting lately. And I click on this one report, and I'm sitting there reading it, and okay, this is a good one. I want to put this one on my list of potential places to visit. And I scroll on to the bottom. There's pictures. There's footprints. Okay, that's cool. And then I see a picture of the investigators who were there, and I see Jim smiling in the center of the picture. So I was like, oh, okay, I know that guy. So I call him up, and it turns out that's the report where he had his sighting. So I called him up and asked him if he would be willing to do another interview and possibly go back to the site, and he's agreed. And I'm actually in talks with 2 other investigators who are on that trip to see if I can talk them into going.
And so far, with meeting these folks in the same field that you are, they've had a chance to see the work that you're doing. So what's been the feedback so far?
So far, I haven't heard either way, good or bad, but they're still in agreement to do it. So apparently, it's not too bad.
No,
I,
and
I haven't had anybody say no, I'm not doing it. So we're good so far.
that's great. You're doing terrific work, and I know it's hard to, especially in this field, because everybody's so busy doing their own thing, to actually find the time and have them sit down and talk about their experiences or their stories, right?
Right. And another thing is, it's not just me doing this. I have other people who are there pretty much every step of the way who've been helping me out. And I can't be any more proud of them than I am for where we are right now and what we're working on. And they, I just couldn't have a better group of people to work with right now on this, I feel.
No, that's great because it takes good people to actually share the same love of the subject as you to make this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyler, Tyler Hensley, he's my main partner on this, and he's very energetic for it. He's all in, and he's willing to sit and listen to people and learn from them, and it's just he makes it very easy to work with him. So that's really nice to have.
Now, with touching upon earlier, you talked about you had two different types of experiences. Have you had any other experiences after filming this or during this?
Possibly. There's one location that we've been to. We've been there several times already. I don't think we're completely done with it. I would like to go back at least one more time. But Tyler, he had come to me months ago and was telling me about this place that he'd went to, and he said while he was there, he got kind of like this weird feeling like he was being watched, and he could hear like something whistling. Now, bear in mind, this is like 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. It's getting kind of late. So he can hear something kind of whistling in the tree line and kind of scurrying around, moving back and forth. And he thought, I might want to go up there and look around. And of course, I said yes. So we go up there. We get there like 6 o'clock, right before it gets dark, so we can, kind of see what we're doing and get our bearings first. And we just go in, and like most of the encounters that I've been hearing, that I've read, are either from people who are camping, hiking, driving, just doing people things. So that's really all we do. We just go in there, we do our thing, we enjoy the scenery. If we see something or something happens, awesome. If it doesn't, then we're still in a really cool spot. It's peaceful, and it's better than being at work. So,
Yeah, doing what you love is always better than being at work. I agree.
right. So, on one of these trips, we're walking down the trail and just kind of talking back and forth, and we hear something, and it's something coming through the leaves. I don't think it was something that was fallen from a tree, because it didn't sound like it was going straight down. Because when I first heard it, it was on the right side of the trail, and we could hear it. It had trajectory. We could hear it going through the leaves over our heads, and it landed on the left side of the trail a few feet away. Tyler looked one way, I looked the other. And we sat there for a long time just listening, trying to see if anything else would happen. And nothing did right then, so we moved a little bit further on down the trail. we might have possibly found a tree twist, maybe. That one's kind of hard for me to make a call on. I've got some people looking at it, and I'm going to get their opinions. And whenever we go, we usually have a digital recorder that we'll either place in a tree or just somewhere safe where nothing's going to bother it. And we just leave it there and let it do its thing. We'll walk away, do something else. We'll leave it overnight. And there's been a few sounds that caught my attention that I have also sent to various people just to get their feedback on. I don't really want to say a whole lot on it until I hear back from them, because I don't want to say, hey, I got something cool, and then hear back from them and find out it's a squirrel or something. But the most interesting thing we got was this sound. It was distant, and it was kind of windy, and it's hard to make out, but it sounded just off enough to maybe be something. So I was talking to one of the investigators that I've been speaking with, and he got me in touch with his audio guy and told me to send it to him. So I'm waiting to see if he's able to clean it up and do anything with it.
That's pretty awesome, because it's very important what you're doing, because you not only you're recording these things, but you're sending it also to get feedback and a second or third opinion, and you're not just putting it out there on social media and say, yeah, this is this, because I think that's what separates a good researcher from people who are carnies or hoaxers out there.
Well, I'm not doing it to get views or anything like that. This is just my own personal interest. I'm doing it for me more than anything. If people watch it, that's great. If people don't watch it, I'm still doing it for myself, because it's something that I feel I need to do at this point, just for me.
No, that's perfectly understandable. And with these sounds that you're hearing, have you encountered any other sounds other than the howling and seeing the trunk being twisted and limbs being broken at a certain height? Because I understand also wood knocking or having items thrown towards your direction is another possible sign of encounter or a warning from these creatures.
That is also what one of the investigators told me when I was speaking to him on the phone. And again, we looked around that area. We went back during the day and also looked around. We went to the spot to where we thought it might have came from. We went up there. We looked around. There was a lot of leaves. The ground was really hard, so it wasn't really a great environment for any kind of prints. And we just didn't see anything that stood out. But it was just one of those things to just put on the list, to have somebody else take a look at it and just have a fresh set of eyes that has more experience than I do, and just see what they think. And whatever they say is going in, be it good or bad. If it's something, awesome. And if it's not, oh well, next spot.
Well, that's just part of being a researcher and investigator. Now, once a lot of this evidence, once it gets weeded out and we get the actual things, is this part of the side projects or the release later on this year or next year? Is that part of those projects that you'll be bringing this evidence into?
I don't know when it's going to be done. We're still working on it. What my plan is, okay, in Judaculla, the view from Devil's Courthouse, you have 4 states. And my goal with Habitats is to hit those 4 states and find a good spot that has a lot of activity and just go in there and see what happens. And if I can get somebody who has had something happen to come along and show the spots where everything went down, even better.
No, and with filming the documentary or even doing your own investigation outside of that, what were some of the challenges that you encountered while you were filming your documentary?
Uh, Weather has been a big one, especially lately. Some of these places are really difficult to get into, and you have a real danger in some of these places of getting hurt, and that from slipping and falling being the biggest one. Tyler and I both have taken a couple of tumbles. A couple of them have been caught on camera, but um, I mean, it's just you know the risks going into it. You know that you might encounter wildlife. You know that you could possibly fall, twist an ankle, break something, things like that. And you just have to accept your risks. And if you really want to know, you have to go after it.
But it's definitely not something you'd recommend for an amateur to go out there and try to make their way in the woods and wind up getting hurt or killed.
No, absolutely not. Um, like I've grown up in the mountains, so I've wandered all over through here throughout my life. So I know I'm not going to say I'm like a woodsman or anything like that, because I'm definitely not. But I do spend a lot of time hiking, and I just try to be as familiar with the environment as I can. Like the location that I was talking about earlier about going to with Jim, I actually went down there on New Year's Day. It was a nice day. It was warm. Best day we've had in a while. I did not want to spend it sitting inside, so I drove down there and just kind of looked around on my own, and just to kind of get a feel of the area, figure out, okay, this goes up here, their encounter was that way, and so on and so forth. Trying to find different spots where I want to set recorders, things like that.
And for the folks that actually encounter something or hear something, what are their best resources, or who are the best people they can report these sightings to make sure that it is what they think they saw or not?
As far as who would be the best to report that to, I'm going to say use your best judgment. Research the different outlets that are out there and find one that you feel comfortable with. I know BFRO is one of the big ones. They're the top dogs in the yard as far as their reporting system and their availability and things like that. You also have the Bigfoot Mapping Project, which has come along in the past few years. That's a really, really awesome tool to have. You got all the pinpoints of the sightings there. If there are recent sightings, they pop up. There are multiple YouTube channels to where they have the podcast format where people can come on and share their encounters with people. They can sit there and talk. They can ask questions. People can ask them questions, and it's a good way to gather with other like-minded people and just kind of surround yourself with the information you're looking for and come to your own conclusions. I'll give you a few that I like and listen to.
All right.
There is Sawdust Beast with Mark Newbill and Larry Porch. They do a really good job. There is Why the Fascination with Russell Van Zylen, Mogollon Monster. He's really good. Hidden Existence with Danielle Aiello. And there's just so many of them out there to choose from. So I'm not going to say I think this one's the best or this one. I just say check them out, see which one is that you feel the most comfortable with, and go with that one.
That's some good advice. And with your documentary that was out already last year, have you made the rounds in the at the conventions? Because I go to a few of them, and there's a lot of great folks out there telling their stories or sharing their films or podcasts. Have you made your rounds yet to go ahead and promote the documentary?
No, I haven't yet. I do want to go to some of these festivals and check them out just because they look like they're a lot of fun. I know a lot of people who go to them. It would be nice to finally get to meet them in person and all that. So it is something that I would like to do in the future.
No, I'll have to run into you. Definitely some of them, especially Carolina. I love Carolina. I spent many, many, many years hanging out there, running around back in the old days. For the listeners of Let's Find Out that would love to learn more about your documentary, where can they go watch it, and what social media can they follow your works in?
You can watch all of our videos on YouTube. Upload everything there. The only social medias that I actually use is probably Instagram, and I'm on there sometimes. YouTube is probably the best place to reach me and find everything.
Perfect. And it's right before we release this episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego, I will be, with your permission, Chuck, of course, providing a link on our social media to go ahead and have the listeners check it out, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Great. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a very busy schedule for coming on the show, and I would love to have you back on later this year because you have the next follow-up series coming up. But before we go, can you give us a quick glimpse into that without any spoilers and what to expect?
We have some places in Georgia that we're looking at, northern Georgia in the Chattahoochee National Forest. We're trying to pin down a few locations in there, and we're also looking into Tennessee. We've just started looking into there, so we haven't really gotten too far into depth on that yet. But if anybody listening is from either of these two states and you have an encounter that you'd like to talk about, I would love to sit down with you and just chat.
Yeah, and also for the listeners of Let's Find Out, if you have an encounter yourself, send me a direct message. I'll pass it along to Chuck and then make the connection and go from there.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, we really appreciate you coming on Let's Find Out. And of course, I'd love to have you back on later this year. Definitely keep in touch, and thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great time. Thank you for inviting me.
This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, my friends.
Thank you for listening to Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, and on Anchor. For more information about Let's Find Out with co-host Diego, please visit us on Facebook.com/co-host Diego, on Twitter at co-host_Diego, and on Instagram as co-host Diego. Copyright co-host Diego. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.